Hello, and welcome to Tartan Touchdown, Scotland's voice in conversation with the world of American football. And welcome to episode 2 of Tartan Touchdown in Conversation With. In Conversation With is our way of sharing the stories of people from all over the world in the sport of American football, which we all love and enjoy. I'm Sarah. I'm delighted to be hosting today's episode. As for episode 2, we have not just one, but 2 members of the 9-time women's flag national champions, the Coventry Cougars, and the Team GB's flag football team. First up, we have the defensive captain, Ellie Thorpe. Ellie, how are you this evening?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. It's cold as always up here, so I'm hopeful it's not as cold as it is up here for you guys. But absolutely delighted to have you on with us. So thanks so much for coming on. And of course, we have superstar wide receiver Grace Conway. Grace, how are you this evening?
Yeah, good, thank you. Got a bit of a cold, so apologies for the way I sound, but all good.
I mean, that's okay. I'm sure we can do something in the edit. We can just turn it up, so it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I know, obviously, Dan as well, kind of obviously previously trying to get you on for a while, so it's so wonderful to speak to you both. And speaking of Dan, joining me as part of the trio is Dan Connor. What's happening, Dan? What's up?
Not too bad. I know Grace is saying we need to worry about her voice with a cold, but most people need to deal with early Glaswegian accents. That's probably a bit more difficult than having to deal with something with a cold. So just bear with us if you can, ladies.
Yeah, no. If there's one point you're just like, what are they talking about? It's fine. Just let us know and we'll sort it. But
yeah, no,
perfect. Well, now, no, go ahead.
I was going to say that's great to have the girls on. I'm looking forward to a really good discussion.
Yeah, I need to have some really great points to kind of go through. So I say now we have the pleasantries out the way, let's just start getting to know everybody a bit better. So at Tartan Touchdown, our chats with guests are all about their full journey. So we would like to take you kind of back to the beginning, find out kind of your roots of your sporting interests and kind of move all the way up till now. So with that in mind, Ellie, why don't you start us off with kind of your earliest sporting memories, like growing up, what kind of sports were you interested in, and pretty much take us from there.
Yeah, sure. So, I've always kind of been quite sporty when I was a kid, played sports at school and things. And my dad was very sporty. So he played water polo when he was a young'un, and then carried on coaching and being very involved with our swimming club. So swimming was sort of my main thing back then, along with water polo, which I don't know if you've seen a lot of water polo, but it's very intense. It's a lot of stamina, a lot of like treading water, also quite violent.
See, I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody who played water polo before, so this is I guess a new kind of point, like open conversation for me. So like essentially because water polo is a team sport, right? You're fully kind of obviously focused on a team. Okay, so yeah, that is. And have you, I guess, kind of like what does that even like entail? Like, what's the training like? Do you just like learn how to swim and then just start going, yeah, cool, let's just start messing about?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you've got to start with the swimming, right? You've got to be a strong swimmer, and then you develop all the other skills like the swimming with the ball and ball skills, throwing when you can't touch the ground, jumping when you can't touch the ground is a very strange experience. So yeah, it was a bit wild, and I guess I did it for that period of time because my dad was really into it and my whole family were really into it. My brother, my sister played, and then I kind of also started dancing. So dancing was the other thing I loved doing. I eventually did that kind of every day after school, every school holiday. And my dad's role changed from like coaching water polo to then driving me like 3 or 4 hours to go dance and back. So yeah, I kind of moved a bit away from that as I got a bit older and went into the dancing stuff, which I guess is quite far away from where we are now, but taught me a lot about things like discipline and commitment and, that dedication to something that I was really passionate about. So that's really where my sporting days started.
Yeah, I get. So I also grew up as a dancer, so I'm totally with you in terms of kind of obviously. I think a lot of people don't realise that it is a total like dedication of time. You are there at dance studio in and day out. Like I went on then to do like musical theatre, so it totally was my whole entire world. And like my dad was also a dance dad because you get dance dads and you get people who are not interested. So yeah, you do learn a lot about discipline, but I guess that for you then was quite easy, obviously, to kind of when you kind of move on eventually to when we talk about your journey in American football, you've kind of got that self-reflection and discipline that's sometimes required within the sport. So yeah, that's That's really interesting. What a cool, interesting journey. But we'll obviously continue on that discussion. But Grace, what about your kind of earliest sporting memories? What kind of drove you?
So very similar to Ellie, my dad was, he's always liked watching sport. He plays badminton himself. And then also my sister is 4 years older than me.
Just was.
Yeah, there's only 2 years now. Yeah, she's 4 years older than me. And obviously it's classic, but I just wanted to do everything she was doing. So she played netball from a young age as well. So that's what got me involved in netball. And then she moved on to dance and I stayed in netball. And then my dad we always used to watch football and play in the garden. So I started playing football, soccer as well. And yeah, just kind of went from there. Throughout school, there's probably not a sport I didn't try and play at some point.
At some point. And did you tend to find kind of growing up, were you kind of exclusively on like women's teams? Were you like, if you were like playing football, were you kind of get like stuck in with like the boys? What?
Yeah, so when I played football, I started when I was 7 or 8 maybe, and I played on all boys team. I was the only girl throughout the whole time that I was the only girl. And then obviously I hit the age bracket where you couldn't play on boys teams anymore, and there wasn't that many women's teams, girls teams, so I stopped playing football and focused on netball then.
You see, when you hit that bracket, obviously you've played. What age was that bracket when that happened? You had to stop playing.
13. As soon as you hit teenagers, yeah,
obviously you played football and enjoyed playing it. So when it got to that age and you had to stop playing, how did you kind of feel about that? What was your thoughts on that? And obviously there's nothing you could do about it, but it must have been a bit disappointing for you.
Yeah, I mean, there were some girls' teams, but not lots super local. It meant you kind of had to travel around, or there wasn't girls' teams that had all the age brackets. So I could have carried it on if I kind of really, really wanted to, but the accessibility just was not there. And I just loved playing on the team that I was playing on. So that bit was really, really sad. I think I'm lucky that obviously I was playing 2 sports at the same time. So it just kind of meant that my focus shifted. Whereas for some girls that play football, they don't have that other sport to kind of go back to.
Yeah, like I guess I remember being on like a girls' football team in like primary school, and then I've just never carried it on. But like there was a couple of girls who were really, really strong players, really, really dedicated and wanted to play and just couldn't carry it on. I think it's really gotten a lot better because I think we're all kind of roughly about the same age. Sorry, Dan.
I'll take it.
Like, so I can see it like now, obviously with like friends who have children and stuff, like can see the difference kind of coming up, which I guess is good. And obviously it takes people that currently play football, women's football, that are making that happen. So obviously we have to appreciate that. If we couldn't have it, but now the future generation gets to have it, I guess.
Definitely.
But coming back to American football, do you kind of both remember what your kind of first like memories of discovering American football are? Did you just like have it on the TV, it just appeared, or was it like a club?
I had never really, like, I knew the sport existed, but to be honest, I had no real interest in it at all. And I know I probably shouldn't say that, but I knew of it, but didn't watch it, didn't find it super interesting, to be perfectly honest. And I only really kind of got more involved in it as I started to play it, and that whole story happened. But yeah, to start with, it wasn't a match made in heaven.
I think the most I'd seen of it was like US, I don't know, like American films and stuff. I really didn't know anything about it at all. And then when I got to university, they have all kinds of weird and wonderful sports. I decided I wanted to try cheerleading because obviously I'd done a lot of dancing. I wanted to like try something new that wasn't too far out of my comfort zone. So I did a bit of that, and then they were very close with the American Football Club. And one of the girls who actually did ran the women's side of the American football was also a cheerleader. So she was like, "Oh, come try it out." And then the guys are going to watch the game on Sunday. And I don't know, it kind of snowballed from there, but I really didn't know anything about it before university.
Yeah, and so it's just so, because obviously Ellie, you're talking about like how knowing it from like American like films. Like I remember I think discovering kind of the sport through like through, I'm really going to embarrass myself, like a Cinderella story, like, because obviously Chad Michael Murray's character plays American football, and I was like, oh, what's this kind of sport? Wow, this is so intense. And then my dad we used to watch the Super Bowl every year, and realistically, I was just tuning in to watch the halftime show. Let's be honest. I was like, who's up there singing? That's fine by me. But I guess as well, kind of what university did you go to, Ellie? Just obviously it was a uni team.
Yeah, Warwick Uni. And that's how I started playing flag as well. So yeah, I always say to people who are like, oh, do I want to go to university? Do I not? Like, there's just so many opportunities. And especially from like a sporting perspective, you suddenly have accessibility to so many different sports, like whatever you want to try, you can. And I'm just like, I can't imagine now not having American football in my life. And I'm like, oh God, it just would have taken me choosing a different path. And then this whole kind of area of my life wouldn't have happened. So.
It's always so funny how like one tiny little decision that you would never ever think about can have a massive kind of impact. And then Grace, did you have something similar like university, or did you just kind of fall in a different way?
I started playing it a lot earlier. I was 14. Basically, the two of the players who actually play in our club and subsequently are now two of my closest friends, they came in with an organisation and did part of a coaching kind of programme through my school. And like I said earlier, there's not many sports I didn't play. So they came in and did an assembly and asked for people to go. And I was like, well, that's another sport. We'll go and see what it's like. So I went and played and all of that. And again, I didn't love it. I played netball and I played football, which are very kind of, from the get-go, quite fast-moving, quick-paced sports. There's lots of people throwing, lots of people catching. And I was like, I just don't understand it. Why does everything have to start with one person? And once I've got the ball, I can't throw it again. I don't like it. And that was 10 years ago, and here I am now. So.
And here, I know. Well, I guess, like, because netball and American football, I guess, are slightly multi-directional depending on what position you're playing in. So I can totally see, I guess, how that kind of follows suit. Also, I suppose me and Dan do have a confession. We did have a look through the Instagrams earlier. So when Ellie was like, oh, I was a cheerleader, I was like, oh yeah, I got that far. I got that far down the list. But we have to make a point. Grace, there's not that many old embarrassing pictures.
Oh,
so
no.
I mean, we're going to need to show some at some point.
Yeah,
so
they're all on Facebook. We don't put them on Instagram.
Okay, we didn't do the Facebook stuff. We just did the Instagram because that was public, and I was like, that's acceptable.
Real in-depth research we do at Tartan Touchdown here.
Tartan Touchdown. We were like, oh, Ellie was a cheerleader. Yeah, Ellie was a cheerleader at one point. Oh, I think Ellie played at university. And me and Dan were like, oh, maybe we should stop now. Maybe now this is getting to a point. But I guess moving on from kind of all that, so let's talk about the Coventry Cougars. Like, when did you both join the team and why? Like, how did that come about? Grace, if you want to go first, I believe you were there obviously before Ellie had joined.
I was, yeah. So back to that story at school, we did the program throughout school, and then they asked a couple of us, the stronger players,
the good ones. That's okay. You can say that. You can say that.
The stronger ones, if they wanted to kind of go ahead, start training with the Coventry Cougars. There was this team in Coventry, and blah blah blah. I was kind of inches away from not going, and one of the people that I went with at the time was convinced me more than really. And yeah, that was in 2014. So 10 years I've been with the Coventry Cougars now.
Gosh, and I have loved it ever since. And what made you kind of fall in love with it then? If obviously you were like, oh, not really interested, it's just another sport to tick off my list. Like, what was the like that kind of spark moment for you?
Actually learning the sport, because I think when you start, obviously we play flag, we don't play contact, but even when you start, everything seems so slow paced. Everything's like, because you have to learn so much of the game. There are quite a lot of rules and things that you need to learn. And once you learn that, it just becomes quicker and quicker and quicker. And then I was like, oh, this is really tactical game. Like, I've got to use my brain here, which I really enjoyed. And yeah, then now I eat, breathe, sleep football. So
it just it's just constantly in the system, I guess.
Yeah.
And then Ellie, how did you kind of wind up? Because again, from my in-depth research, you were at kind of some other teams before kind of coming up. So if you can walk me through how that all happened.
So as I said, I started at university. I started playing for our university women's team. I think that was the first year of the women's league in 2013. I think that it was like the year before you started, Grace, or the same year. We started around a similar time. I'm just a bit older. And then was with them until I graduated. And then I was like bouncing around a bit. I joined a new team based in London. So I kind of traveled down to London to train with them. And I had some really good friends on that team. But they were kind of a group of kind of expats in London. There was quite a few international players. They all started to move away. And I thought, oh, what do I want to do here? And I'd become quite good friends with some of the Coventry Cougar girls from the GB setup, which I'd joined at that point. So we were becoming quite close. And then I guess lockdown happened and I joined them in 2021 after quite a few conversations about why I should join them. But yeah,
I thought you were going to leave that bit out there. I thought you were going to leave the hard sell out that we had to do.
How was the hard sell? Like, did we have banners? Were we messaging constantly? We're like, please come. Like, what was that?
Yeah, it was intense. We promised her she could be the first paid player of the Coventry Cougars. We'd give her £1 a month.
Yeah, to do that.
Yeah, subs for her.
Yeah, get your subs. Yeah, get your Patreon up for Ellie to come and join the Coventry Cougars. You just got to do what you got to do, I guess, don't you?
Exactly.
But yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it.
Okay, good. Did you pay her to say that too? I guess, obviously, just make sure she was.
Yeah, all the bribes.
All the bribes in for it.
What?
I mean, obviously it worked. I mean, we're here having this discussion that wouldn't have happened, obviously, with that kind of bribery, I guess. So obviously, coming up to kind of win that 9th title, so you obviously beat. I guess we should be a wee bit sad about this, Dan. They beat the UK Pirates. You beat them 21-6 in December 2023. What's that like? What is that kind of like last kind of moment? If you walk us through that.
It was a big day, wasn't it? It was a strange season for us. Obviously, Grace was out last season, which was huge for our team because she's amazing on the field, but she's also a huge leader off the field. So we had to play our season completely differently. So that was kind of the first thing. Our quarterback was also pregnant during that season, so we didn't have our quarterback. We had a couple of other injuries on the team as well. So actually it looked very different to our previous kind of seasons. I don't really know what else to say that.
Yeah, it was intense. Obviously, I was on the sideline, and actually in that game, of the people that were involved in that game, you've got the two that weren't involved on the podcast because I was on the sideline, and Ellie actually, unfortunately, got ejected in that game. So yeah, but the whole, like Ellie said, the whole season was like the hardest we've ever done. It was so intense. Lots of moving things around, lots of moving parts throughout the whole season, and kind of moves and counter moves, trying to make sure that we stayed in games and got that 9th title.
A lot more kind of film prep, a lot more strategy than we normally would have because of all of those different variables. So Grace and I had such a clear game plan for the teams on that finals day. Because we wanted to account for anything that was going to go wrong, and of course things went wrong. So it was an intense build up to that day, and then just a very chaotic day.
Yeah, there's my point you made there, obviously, about video footage and stuff. Obviously, you've both been with Coventry for a while. How have you seen the sport develop in terms of you can now get video footage on your opponents going back? I mean, I played the sport 20 years ago when that was never a thing, but even going back 10 years, 5 years, it's obviously changed a lot since then. How much of a difference does that make to your game plan and prepping for an opponent?
I mean, huge. I think it can win or lose games. And I think we really learnt that from GB more than Cougars, right? So our coaches had such a focus on film analysis, making sure that we were ready for each and every game we were going to play, what we needed to do differently, making a game plan specifically for that team. And we kind of brought some of that learning to the way we planned our games for the Cougars.
Yeah. So I'm going to go, Ellie. I'm going to jump back to a point you said, obviously, about the ejection, right? I don't want to ask why you got ejected, but obviously, I don't know if you guys keep up with the NFL, but I'm a Jaguars fan, so obviously Trevor took quite a bad hit last night. So I'm going to hope that it wasn't anything at the level that happened yesterday.
No, I doubt it. It's, you know what, there were never ejections in flag. I don't know if I've seen another one. So it is an anomaly. And I would say it probably wasn't deserved. I definitely deserved a flag, a penalty. I basically had a bit of a tackle that was out of control and ended up wiping out Ainsley in the EKP team. But, you know, Ainsley and I played together at GB that whole season. I spoke to her afterwards, you know, I think we're fine. But the whole thing was just very emotional, very chaotic. It was like everyone was really into the game. The coaches were furious. It was all very intense. Yeah, but I'm not sure I should have been ejected for that.
It was very intense, and she definitely shouldn't have been ejected. I didn't think you were going to say that, so I was going to say it for you.
Grace is just there to hype me up in the sidelines. Like, as long as nobody's throwing punches, I guess it's totally
nothing
totally
like that.
Fine.
Yeah.
No.
What I love about this sport is they say it's a non-contact sport, but really, this sport in general can't be non-contact, even at flag level. When you're competing for the ball and stuff like against DBs, or you're the DB goes. There is always going to be contact in this sport, even though it's not basically non-tackle. They should rename it non-tackle rather than non-contact, because having played the sport, it is quite a physical game, even though it is meant to be non-contact. And obviously took it a wee bit too far early, but we'll take your word that you didn't deserve it.
Yeah. We'll just run the clip back on it.
Go on Instagram, Sarah, I'm sure you'll find it.
Yeah, I'll just do my dip dive. It's fine. We'll just insert it now, and it'll be everybody else can see it. No, I'm just kidding. I won't actually do that. I don't have the editing skills for that. But obviously, as well, from my understanding as well, like the Winter League kind of format has changed a little bit. Obviously, kind of what's the kind of thoughts on that at the moment?
So previously you used to have the season would start in September, end in December, and you would have kind of a minimum of 2 game days a month, and the finals would be in the December. And now they started in September. We had a bye, so we started in October, and then they're once a month until the finals are in March. So it's changed slightly. I'm yet to decide whether I prefer it or not.
I mean, it's nice to extend the season a bit, right? I think that's always nice. I really struggle with playing in the cold. I really struggle with it, and I have to do so much more preparation for like injury prevention and things. So I'm not going to like that January game day, especially after everyone being off for Christmas. I'm already like, the injuries are going to be, we'll see.
But I'm assuming, assuming they've also separated it from the men's league, but moving it to a winter league feels as if unfair, is what I'll say. There's other times of the year they could probably have done this, but obviously you mentioned there earlier about the cold weather and stuff like that. But for you as players, how does it feel that they moved it to the winter? What was your thoughts behind when they moved it last season?
Well, it's always. Oh, sorry, Grace.
No, you go.
I was going to say it's always been kind of after the mixed league, I guess, so that people can participate in both. And the mixed league is huge, right? So there's not that much other flexibility to kind of move it around.
Yeah.
So we've always played in the autumn coming up to the winter anyway. So it's not ideal, and I think we definitely prefer to play in the summer. But I think it's hard to prioritise the women when the men, like the mixed league is so much bigger, right? The participation's crazy. We've got, I think, 17 teams in the women's at the moment. You know, and I don't know how many are in the mixed, a lot more. So it's kind of hard to justify, but it is frustrating.
Okay, so I think 17 women's teams is still pretty amazing, to be honest, in comparison to what it must have been like even maybe pre-COVID, pre-lockdown, and like the amount the sport has even developed in that kind of short amount of time is incredible. In comparison,
I mean, we used to, obviously when the league first started, I think we had a handful of teams. I would say it's been not stagnant, but it's been around like between 14 to 17 the last few years. I think we'd like to see it growing a bit a bit faster than it is. And I'm hoping with all eyes on the future in 2028 that will happen.
No, yeah, for sure. And then if you could walk me down kind of through your season so far. So obviously we're 4-0. Oh my god, this is when we found out we were wrong. But we're 4-0 so far, having only played one game, like one game day. So how were the first 4 games for you? I mean, obviously we're doing something right. We're on our Chiefs dynasty at the moment. So walk me through kind of what's happened so far.
Yeah, I'll take this one because Grace and our quarterback Millie were actually in Barcelona playing for an international team that weekend. I know, lots of exciting stuff. But then, of course, again, we were missing our quarterback and Grace. But we've become quite used to adapting, moving things around. So, it was a good first game day. We've got a few new recruits in the team, so we're really keen to make sure that they're getting game time. We're developing them. We're learning together. So that's kind of been a bit of a shift of focus for us. So we've got our core players that have been around the setup for a long time now, but we're trying to bring in new players all the time, especially kind of younger players if we can. We've got a girl who's just turned 18. She's been with us for a year or so now, and she's just come on so far during that time that it's exciting to see, us getting more new young talent in. So that was kind of a shift of focus. The games, I think we weren't sure what to expect from some of the teams because obviously we've got like Birmingham Lions tackle team now have a flag team, so they're coming in. We weren't sure what they were going to be like. We've got London Flame, another kind of evolved team, but potentially with some new blood. So yeah, we were kind of going in a bit blind, but it was a good first day. We kind of just stuck to the stuff we know, we can do well. And executed.
So I got a question, Ellie, the point you made there about you've got some new talent coming into the team. Like, over the last couple of years, how have you found a lot more people showing interest in the sport, or especially within your team anyway? Is there more people joining, more people showing interest in the sport, have you found?
Grace, do you want to go on that one?
Yeah.
Probably been
so we had like our yearly meeting as a team, and it was one of the objectives that we set out that we'd like to up the recruitment. We, like Ellie said, we've had kind of the core group for basically since we started. So we're all aging and we're trying to get the new lot in, the faster legs. So yeah, it was one of our objectives, and we've got quite a handful of new players now. I still, from even 10 years ago, I'd be lying if I said I've seen a huge change in people taking the sport up, which, like Ellie said, hopefully in the coming years that does increase massively. But we know how we need to do it. It's just it's trying to have all the time and to do that, because ideally we need to go back into schools, need to do all of that. Yeah. But at the end of the day, this is not our day job. This isn't paying the bills. But it would be nice if we could get some more players coming to us kind of from different sports, or kind of things getting the American football and flag football's name out there a bit more. Things like podcasts, and we see things on like the NFL halftime show. You've got things like the NFL flag and the adverts and things like that. All stuff like that would hopefully increase the numbers as well.
Like 100%, yeah. I guess it is just totally, it is giving the kind of amplification that it needs and putting it on a higher level. Because there's probably those people there who may probably be interested in it, but just don't even know where to like start, how to even look at like joining a club. Like I think I'm personally too old to start, but I would have loved to have done it at some point. So I guess again what I was kind of mentioning earlier about how this is kind of the reason for why we're doing this, is to give the sport the platform it deserves. And it's not just the bright lights of the NFL. It goes all the way down to the kind of the court and the people that play it and the people that live and breathe it every single day. So yeah, anything that we can do obviously to support. And maybe, Tan, we're just going to have to go down and go again. That's it.
I was thinking that just when they were talking about it, I'm like, yeah, we road trip. So I'm up for it.
We'll go. We'll just go in the car. It'll be fine. We'll drive wherever you need us to go. We'll be there.
Only if they move away from a winter league. I don't fancy going out for
I know. I can't. Me and Dan can't do the cold. Like we can't stand in the cold. At least you turn on and about. It's fine. It's fine for you guys. We're stuck inside.
We've got to road trip up to Scotland for the finals, so that might be a good day.
Yeah, we will be there.
We'll be there.
We will definitely be there.
We will be there. Yeah, we'll be there in our. We'll need to pick a colour to wear because we'll need to decide a team and pick the colour.
Cougar pink.
The problem.
We're meant to be partial. Is there any teams that wear purple and grey?
No, but there is quite a big one that wears purple and pink. So I don't know.
So I don't know. Maybe we'll have to do that.
We can kind of disguise the fact that we're supporting them by wearing grey as well. We might get away with it.
We might get away with it because our colours are purple and grey. So I mean, I'll wear pink something, and it'll be no one will notice that. I'll wear like a pink hat or something. It'll be totally fine. But kind of moving on from kind of the Coventry Cougars to Team GB, what does that first call up look like? How does that happen? And then more, I guess, obviously continuing that, more importantly, how does it feel to be kind of obviously selected? If just walk us through the process for that.
Yeah, I mean, so my first trial I think was 2016 for the 2017 cycles, around that time, and there were quite a few players that came to the trial. I remember being surprised by how many. I'd never seen everybody together who played and was good at the sport turning up in one place. So I remember being oh my god, this is a lot of people. And at that time I think I was playing one very specific. I was playing the blitz position, quite specific, not what I play now. And there were loads of us there doing it. And I remember thinking, God, I've not really got a chance here because these people all must be really good. But I did make the team. It was quite intense. We all got kind of called into a room one by one to speak with the coaches. And yeah, I remember being really overwhelmed at the time that it had been a yes and that I was going to be playing for my country. But I think it didn't properly hit until I then was at a tournament with them in the kit and facing other nations. And then you're oh God, this feels really surreal. Not so much anymore, but that first time, it's God, this is big. Yeah.
It's just when you're just sitting there a little bit, how get kind of pulled in one by one, and you sit there. It feels I don't know if you've two watched obviously the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders documentary when they get pulled into that and they find out if they're being cut. Oh, I think that would slowly just all of my anxiety would just kind of ball burst into a ball. But I kind of, Grace, what was your kind of story? Was it kind of similar to Ellie's? You just get asked to come to a tryout and kind of go from there, I guess? Yeah,
so similar. So at the Cougars, obviously you can imagine that quite a lot of the team were a part of the GB setup. So I had known when they went to their first tournament, that I know of in 2015. I was part of the team then, so I kind of saw them go off. And then at the same trials that Ellie was at, not that she probably remembers, but at the same trials that Ellie was at, I was also there. I trialled that year for the 2017 Euros. And I'd had quite a good season and trialled quite well. I had that same conversation, but mine did not go as well. So mine was a no. So I got put into the Silvers squad, so kind of the development silver team. So I was in there for a year. And then in 2018, one of the girls who was part of the gold setup decided that she was stepping away from it, and I got a call up then from Silvers to go into the gold squad. And yeah, the rest is history. But yeah, again, I think that first time, my family, we had a game actually in Scotland. We played against Sweden as a friendly. It was my first game. And my family came up and they came to watch and support and all of that. And it did feel huge. It meant a lot to get there, and the kind of the work that I'd gone through in the silver squad and all of that to push through and finally make the full squad was, it meant a lot.
Just to add, Grace, if you watch her play now, you would really question that decision. Watching her play even back then, it's wild that she got a no. But speaks a lot to your resilience and the work you put in after that to make sure the next one was a yes.
Yeah, that wasn't going to happen again.
Chris is like, no, I'm getting in regardless of how I get there. I'm pushing it up. And then your 2023 kind of obviously your European champions in Ireland, and you beat Spain 26-19. Do you remember kind of those key moments, Ellie, of like doing that, and kind of how you felt after that would kind of all finally like come to be?
Yeah, I remember some moments really well. We had a big build up to that game, like a huge gap from when we played the previous game up until then. And we'd done our normal warm up and everything. And then they put us in like this like holding pitch while they were getting like everything ready. And it was all like this big ceremony and everything. And that was so nerve-wracking because you're like, I'm about to play the biggest platform we've ever played. What do I do at this time? Like, we'd had our team talk, like we were all mentally ready. And then you're there just like waiting. So that was excruciatingly painful. The nerves were there. Everybody was like, can we just play already? And personally, one of my responsibilities in that game was man marking Spain's best receiver. So I was there like, oh my God, I'm just so in my head right now. And even like the first couple of drives on the field, I was like really not myself because I'd had this huge build-up of pressure. So it took me a while to settle. And then I think it was about the third or fourth drive, I was like, okay, I can do this. I had to have a work for myself. And I settled into it. So I remember those build-up moments. And then I remember most of our offensive scores thinking, God, we can do this. We're executing here. Everybody played really well. Defensively, we got a couple of stops. Again, I was like, if I can just keep doing my job, I think we'll be okay. But the game was really close. It came right down to the wire. And the last play, I don't know if you've seen it, was kind of like Hail Mary to the end zone. Spain were there. A couple of us defensive players got the shorter players got pulled off and taller players put on. So I was there on the sideline like, oh my God, this is so stressful. The ball's up in the air, you're watching it all happen and everyone's coming together. Thankfully, they did not catch it, did not score. So, and then everybody just erupted. It was wild. And the emotions were just something else. I don't even think we could really speak properly. We're just all there like on the pitch. Yeah.
Something you mentioned there about the pressure and the build up to that game. Obviously, flag football is seen as a public park sport. It's just the way it is at the moment. The perception of it is you play at the public park. You're then going to a level, play the European Championship, which is effectively it's an elite level sport. Flag football really is. It just doesn't get the recognition as that. From a mental health perspective, what did Team GB do to support you guys in kind of making that step up from playing at the weekend down your local park to suddenly playing in the final of a European Championship? Did they give a lot of support and help you through that sort of situation?
It's been much more of a focus for the programme in the last year or so. So we've talked a lot more about working as a team and like building trust in each other, but also handling mental resilience. So we started looking more into that. I would say we've still got a long way to go in getting that level of support because really each team needs a sports psychologist that's there to support the team, at every camp and things like that. We don't quite have that at the moment, but we're hoping that with some of the investment that we're hoping to get in the programme in the coming years, like that will be a really important part because it's so important. And yeah, personally, from my perspective, but also seeing some of the other players in the team, there's such that your level of performance is so impacted by your mental outlook and your mental resilience. So it's a huge part of sport, and I think it's been so overlooked, particularly in our sport because we haven't had the funding.
Again, hopefully we can help kind of obviously in the journey to getting that better recognition that it so really deserves. And I guess kind of obviously talking about mental health kind of does sort of nicely, I don't want to say nicely because it's maybe not the nicest topic to talk about, but does lead us into kind of obviously yourself, Grace. So obviously in May 2023, you suffer obviously your kind of obviously major injury during a game. Can you kind of take us through like the lead up to that injury, like what kind of happened in the moments after when that happened?
Yeah, so it had been quite a compressed schedule really in the weeks before that game day. So we'd had GB camp, we'd had our own training, we'd gone to King Bowl as part of kind of the GB setup where we played there, and I'd kind of twinged my hamstring while we were out there. And then we came back and we had a mixed league BAFA game day, and I deep down knew really that I probably shouldn't have played, and it's taught me a painful and expensive lesson. But I played. I did a move that I've done 1,000 times in the sport, and that's it. My knee just gave way. I dropped to the floor. I didn't know what had happened. I feared of what it could be. I saw 3 or 4 physiotherapists who had all decided that it wasn't my ACL, almost cancelled my knee appointment, went to see a knee specialist, and within about 30 seconds he said, yeah, so you've ruptured your ACL. And that was the journey. That was in May of 23. So obviously was in the lead up to, I didn't actually find out until June. So I did it in May and I found out in June, and obviously should have been going to play in the Euros in the August, but had to pull out of the squad.
And then, like, kind of when so obviously you find out, and obviously it must be so kind of heartbreaking. There's like 1,001 kind of thoughts going in your head at one time. Do you kind of remember immediately, like, obviously I guess your head immediately does go to not being able to play in the Euros, I guess, is obviously your first kind of thought. Like, what was the immediate kind of thought after that? Do you fear for yourself? Like, are you kind of focused on yourself? Are you focused on your team? Like, how does kind of the thoughts kind of come from that?
It was a lot. Yeah, definitely. I basically had to decide whether I wanted to go still with the team and be a part of kind of the sideline and all of that, or did I want to stay at home? I made the decision to go because I think either way it was going to be tough, but it would have been a lot worse if I was at home. And I just helped in any way that I could help. It wasn't in the way I wanted it to be, but it was things like filling water up, getting towels, helping with the warm-up, helping like have conversations before games with players that I knew maybe are a little bit more kind of need that mental preparation. Just lots of different things that people had lots of different ways of getting in the zone, and it was just however I could help that. And then in like the downtime doing the bits that they didn't have, so I had to go to a lovely WADA drugs meeting for them so that they didn't have to go. So I was sat in that for like 2 hours. So just different things to make their life a little bit easier. And then I think immediately when I found out, obviously my head went straight to I'm not going to be able to play. But it was also, I've got to get this sorted because the Worlds is coming up next year, because I had no doubt that they were going to go and do what they did. So, yeah.
In terms of, obviously, Grace just took us through what she did to try and help the team, but how big for the team was it for you guys having her just in Ireland with you, supporting you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy decision to make because being on the sideline is really, really difficult. Watching your team knowing that you should be on that is really hard. And Grace obviously did it at Euro, she did it the whole of last season. But also the cost of going out to one of those competitions is between £800 and £1,400. So it's not cheap. And to go out there, pay that money and not play is also a burden, right? So first of all, not everybody would make that choice to go out and support the team. But second of all, Grace brings not only all of the stuff she talks about on the sideline, refilling water, but a huge amount of football knowledge. I think she knows more than, I'd say 99.9% of other people I know about football, and imparts that knowledge regularly. So having her there was also really valuable from a strategic perspective, and continues to be. Not having her there last season at the Cougars meant that other people had to step up and play out of position or whatever. I played a lot more offense than I ever had before, but she taught me more in that year than I'd ever learned about offense before. So yeah, it was hugely important she was there. She was a huge part of the team. And again, I cannot say enough about her resilience. And I think it pushed us all to work a lot harder, because seeing the work that she was putting into the gym while she was injured was like, oh God, well, I should be at the gym. I'm not injured. So it was hugely motivating for everyone else as well.
Yeah, because I've kind of caught, because obviously, Grace, you have that kind of like compilation video on your TikTok where you can like see the injury happening, and then it kind of follows kind of a bit more of your like rehabilitation progress and how you were kind of obviously strengthening it back up. So did you, I guess you obviously went to a physio, I would assume, after your kind of surgery, and they went through, and then did you kind of just pull stuff yourself? Like, how did you come up with your kind of like training plan to be able to come back?
Oh, God, it was a minefield. Basically, all the way back, I had a decision. If I wanted to wait on the NHS, it would be a year's wait before I could even have the surgery, which then you're obviously out rehabbing for another year. So I wouldn't have even been fit now. So I made the decision to pay and go private and have the surgery done. And then from there, you can select your dates. So we basically came back from the Euros, and 3 days later I was in having surgery. And I'd lined up lots of different stuff. Luckily, like to this day, someone was looking down on me because I managed to get an NHS physiotherapist who basically knew everything about the injury, had like studied under the best ACL surgeons in America and knew everything back to front, inside out. It was insane. I'd go in like my knee hurts, and he'd be like, right, it's your left hip and your right hip and your like left toe, and it's like by the time I'd come out, I'd be like, oh, I feel great now. And it's just stuff that you would just never know by yourself. You can't figure that stuff out. And then I also paid, because what he couldn't give me, obviously being NHS, is a set program, which I knew you needed. Like you have to have that. Do this, turn up, do that, because otherwise it's not valuable. So I had to pay then to have an S&C coach who really helped, and again, I couldn't have done it without him. So it's a lot. It's nutrition, it's S&C, it's physio, and obviously and then it's the time, and we're doing all of that on top of this not being our job. So it's these footballers that go and get their injuries, as much as no one wants it, they've got their team doctor and their team physio and their team nutritionist who gives them their meals and tells them when to eat and what to eat. And all of that was just kind of a stab in the dark and a lot of research to try and figure out the best way to try and do it.
I think that's one of the hardest bits, is like so much of it is going out and finding the information yourself. And there's so much out there that often it's hard to separate like what is actually the right information, what is factual, which trainers actually know what they're talking about. Like I think most people have S&C support outside of the program now, because you need it. You need some guidance outside of what you're just doing on the field. And like the trainer I'm currently using, I actually met because I've been seeing a physio that Grace had recommended to me that worked with this trainer. So it was almost like if I hadn't had that recommendation and then met them and trusted that they had the knowledge, like I don't, my previous trainer I know didn't have that knowledge. So it's really hard to go out and constantly be finding the right people and the right information yourself. And again, that's something that we'd hope with future investment into the program, they would provide us more guidance there.
Yeah, totally. It just must be a minefield of people, and you're completely right about how do you walk the line between what is like true and what is, obviously there's not a guidebook. It doesn't work for everybody. Not everything is going to work the same way for somebody else. So it's obviously really important to find somebody that can work. So, and obviously we're very grateful, Grace, that whatever lucky star fell upon you has made it allow you to come back. Because I guess obviously when you're going through that recovery process, like, is there a moment where you kind of like doubt that if you're going to be able to come back to the game?
A lot. Every day. You'd leave, you'd have one good gym session, and then the next day you'd be back and it'd be rubbish, and then like my knee would hurt again. I wouldn't be able to do stairs again. I would hurt getting out of bed, and then the next day it'd be fine again. And it was just like that constant loop of, will I play? No, yes, maybe. And then even like as close as kind of April time, April into May, my physio was like, oh, I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think you're at a point where you'll be able to play. And obviously I was still having to go to all the GB camps and things like that. So it was just, it was a lot of ups and downs, and yeah. a lot of up and down.
And what did you have kind of, was there something that you could like kind of go back to, I guess, to motivate you to kind of like push through that kind of barrier when it came to those kind of dark moments? Did you have like a kind of point that you were like, this is what I'm working towards?
Yeah, so the Worlds was always my aim. I had a countdown on everything that I could get a countdown on. I knew how many days I had, and when I didn't want to get up in December and on Christmas Eve and go to the gym, it reminded me that I had to. And my best friend, when I got injured, she bought me a book and kind of made me journal everything in it. So when I would think this is never going to happen, I can't believe this, I would go back and be like, God, like 2 weeks ago I couldn't even walk. I couldn't walk without crutches 2 weeks ago, and now I can. So it was a lot of that. And also the TikTok, that wasn't made ever for public eyes, but I couldn't post it without everyone seeing it. But that was for my own personal benefit, so I could go back and see that different changes throughout the journey.
Because you kind of obviously forget, because especially obviously the way that kind of obviously our bodies are set up, like we don't remember the hard parts. Sometimes you don't remember what that was like. So obviously I think it's really great. Obviously you were able to kind of find journaling as a way kind of obviously not coping with it, but an outlook for it. Because, and also, I mean, it must be I don't know if you pick it up very often, but it must be amazing at one point to be able to go back in a couple of years and be like, I did all that and I broke through all that barriers. Like for me, I've never had like a major injury, touch wood, obviously, but for somebody who's never like experienced it themselves, to know somebody else has done that is just like an incredible like achievement. It shows so much resilience, and obviously I'm sure your teammates say, but you obviously should be very like proud of yourself and your journey on that, because I don't know how I would do it. So I mean, hats off. And what does it how does it feel to kind of step back on that field for the first time, like in training with your team? How do you remember what that kind of moment was like?
So the first time I actually managed to get back in time to get signed off to play in our August camp. So thankfully I managed to get a few reps in before I went into what was kind of the biggest tournament ever. So I'd done a bit of that, and Ellie will attest to this as well, but I'm not very good at not being very good at something. So what was frustrating is that I'd come back and I'd be like, well, that doesn't look right. That's wrong. I've run that wrong. This is wrong. So that bit was difficult. But I mean, stepping on the field outside, our first game was against Czechia. I played, I think I first went on the field and just towards the end of the first half. And it felt very surreal, but also I couldn't think about it too much because you got a job to do. So you get on the field and you catch the football.
Ellie, for you as one of the team captains, and having that moment where Ellie stepped back onto the field, like how did that feel for you guys as a team?
Yeah, I mean, everyone obviously had followed Grace's journey and seen it firsthand because she'd been out all of our camps through the year. She was like doing a rehab on the side before we got into our scrimmage. So everyone was like following her progress. And the first camp she made back, that one in August, it was just like, it was like a real delight to see her back on the field and just doing what she does so well. I remember you saying, Grace, like, it's hard because I have to make myself think about everything. Like, is my knee facing this way? Is it moving to the side? Am I moving all my body in one direction so that I'm not putting any additional pressure on my knee? And I think that you said that was a real shift for you, because you can't just focus on playing the game. You have to be thinking about how you're moving. And I think you were really cautious that first camp. But then watching you on the field in Finland in that first game against Czechia, you know, you didn't look any different. Like, she's out there, she's scoring touchdowns, she's catching these unbelievable passes. Like, you would agree, right? You've come back stronger. I think when you first came back and we did that testing at camp, Grace had the highest vertical jump out of the whole team post injury. So like, she's come back stronger, and we're only going to see that keep going up. So yeah, I think it was a huge like sigh of relief she was back, and like, wow, she's done it. She's better than ever. She wouldn't say
because like I don't know, she's too modest. Because you've of course sort of answered, I guess, kind of a question, Ellie, that I had for Grace was obviously like, does your playing style and your approach change? And I guess obviously for the first couple of games it does change because you're obviously constantly thinking about something happening to it again, or like what. And I guess as well is that, is this movement okay? Is this movement normal now? Because obviously it does change and there is an impact on that. Do you find that you've kind of gone almost back to how you used to play? Or, I mean, obviously, but better? Or do you find that your new way of playing is the better version of you?
Swings and roundabouts, really. I think some things have got better. I think having to actually think about my body and how I'm moving it and where I'm moving it to can be both beneficial and kind of take away from the sport as well and how I play. I am definitely not back to my 100% yet. I know that. And I'd like to see it go past that from how I used to play as well. Just different. I used to be able to move it a lot quicker and smoother than what I can right now. But it will get there. It will come back. And hopefully the more they say it takes a year to rehab and a year for your new knee to feel like your knee again. So we're halfway there on that bit. So another 6 months or so and I'll be fine.
You'll be fine. I guess this kind of leads all well to, obviously there's a big discussion at the moment about kind of women in sport and kind of the injuries they are kind of obtaining at the moment. Like there's the stat out there at the moment is that female athletes are like 4 to 6 times more at risk of ACL injuries when like in multi-directional sports when comparing to kind of to men. Do you think there's anything kind of obviously that can be done to help reduce that number, if anything? I know Ellie obviously you've not had like an ACL injury, but do you think there's anything in particular that can be done?
Well, we've talked a bit about kind of from a kit perspective, you know, the things that are there for women are not functional. Like the things we wear are not designed for the sport we play. So like even finding the right pair of shorts is a nightmare. Finding leggings that don't fall down. Finding a pair of boots that fit. I was playing in a size too big for years because I couldn't find my size boots in the UK. So finding the right kit, I mean, they've talked a bit about boots in women's football, haven't they? Anyway, like not being designed for women's sports. Our bodies are different. But you can kind of see that in our sport as well. So I think there is something to say there about accessibility and having the right equipment for women.
Because I think the focus at the moment is obviously with soccer, when they've designed those shoes, they've designed them for men's feet, like you were saying, and women tend to land slightly more flat-footed, is what I kind of believe, and obviously they're now working on that with kind of like women's soccer players, and obviously to make that better for them. But I can't believe you're playing in shoes that are too big for, like you're playing with shoes that are too big for you, just because it's just not accessible. And do you think there's
shredded?
I can only imagine. Do you think, like Grace, do you think there's anything else kind of in particular that can kind of help that? I know obviously I've kind of noticed as well, kind of watching some of the kind of playbacks, obviously you're in kind of more like a knee kind of brace type situation now. Do you think that would be beneficial kind of in general, or what do you kind of think, if there's anything extra?
I could get on my soapbox about this topic.
Please do.
Obviously, being injured, I did a lot of research and things into all that. And actually, I read the same stat about every shoe in the world is made to a male size 8 and then sized up or sized down for depending what size that needs to be. So for Ellie in kind of a size 5, they've just sized it down, but they've not changed it for the anatomy of a woman and how we jump, how we land, how we run, and just our bodies in general are very different. And then it's the same with all kind of sports research as well. It's all, not all, that's a lie, I won't say that, but the majority is obviously done around male sports, around male athletes, and obviously even if you take the menstrual cycle out of it and all the hormones, just our bodies are very different and how our muscles work and all of that's very different. And then when you add the menstrual cycle in and the hormones and all of that, you've got a huge mess of no research and not knowing what to do and when to eat and how to hydrate and what to wear and how we should be affecting our training and things like that. I think it's getting better, but I think it has gone a long way to go before it gets much better
where it should be. Because when you were mentioning about obviously like the menstrual cycle having an impact, it's I can't remember what part it is, but you're more likely to do something to your knee because you produce less collagen in your knee at a specific point. And that's nuts because, you know, male players would just maybe can just walk on it kind of any point in the month and not even have to second guess it. And I guess, have you been able to kind of share that knowledge with kind of obviously your teammates and pass on a kind of bit more information about it?
Yeah, I try to pass it all on. It's the thing is with playing, obviously you mentioned that flag football's seen as like a kind of backyard park thing, but obviously we play an elite sport at a non-professional level. So for even just things like our supplements, they have to be batch tested. We can't take anything that you see, like a protein that you see in Boots or Holland and Barrett. We can't take that. We have to take everything that's supplement checked. So throughout the injury and all the research, I obviously found as well about the whole collagen thing. So then I had to start taking collagen. But like that was, for example, that was £40 for 20 sachets. So it's not even a month and it's costing you £40. So when you start adding all of those things up, like batch tested whey protein is like more than double the price of what a normal protein is. But we have to take it because we play for GB, but there's no extra, there's nothing else there. It's just because we play an elite sport. So it's like spinning plates. But yes, long way of answering it. I do try and pass all the knowledge on. It's just an expensive knowledge to pass on to everyone else. Ellie hates me because I'm like, Ellie, you should buy this. Ellie, you should do that. And she's like, oh, leave me alone.
Grace knows everybody. Grace knows what everybody's doing.
I also think just from a, younger boys and younger girls, when they start playing sport and things, approach to training definitely for our generation was very different for boys and girls. Like, I don't think I went to a gym properly until university, whereas boys, they were much more likely to be in the gym and knowing more about training. I think that will change and is changing over time, but for our generation, I think that has an impact on how you play now, right? Like the way that you've molded your body over that time is going to be different. I think that approach to training probably has had an impact too.
Definitely.
I'm not going to pretend that I've got any say in this matter at all, so I'm just going to stay out of this exact topic. But a question I've got on it is, have you found, obviously you play for Coventry at a women's team, but at a GB level, do you feel that these sort of things are starting to be considered in terms of the support you are getting, in terms of, you mentioned different things about supplements and different aspects of the way you need to train and stuff like that, being a female athlete? Do you feel that at that kind of international level, that's starting to be considered for you?
It's something we're starting to talk about more. Again, we don't have the level of support we'd like to see and we would expect to see moving into the Olympic cycle. But things like our menstrual cycles and the impact that's having on how we're playing, we're all aware of it. We'd like to get a full-time nutritionist who's giving us a bit more personal guidance on that stuff. But again, it's something that we need investment for. But it's definitely on the program's radar as a area of focus.
Yeah, so they are something I consider. What you said, it just comes down to finances at the end of the day. But sounds like I have an opinion on it from a guy's point of view. Like, that's not an issue in the men's game. We don't worry about that in the men's game. So why you having to worry about it in the women's game? It sounds ridiculous that, well, they can fund it for the men's game, so why can't they fund it for the women's game? It's just because it maybe take a bit more. There's a bit more involved in it. That shouldn't be a barrier to it. So yeah, I'll join your soapbox.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuance involved as well, because it's not as if everybody's cycle affects them the same, right? Yeah. Everybody's so different. And a lot of that is also the mental load, and the way you feel when you're playing at that time of the month can be really different from one person to the next. So it's hard, again, to just be like, oh, we can get some support for that, when everybody actually needs a lot more individual guidance. And it's something that you would need to do a lot of research on yourself, because at the moment we haven't had that level of expertise necessarily in the team. So everybody's kind of trying to pull apart what works for them and what's going to support them best. Yeah,
well, hopefully with it, like you say, with the Olympic cycle and the funding that's coming with that, it's something to start taking a wee bit more serious than have in the past.
Totally, 100%. Well, we'll move on from this discussion, because we all could get on a soapbox, and I'm sure we'll all now be going up to anywhere we can with our banners and with our signs. We'll go to talking about 2024 Worlds. And how do you prefer, like, kind of prepare mentally and physically for the intensity of that? So obviously, Grace, I know obviously just coming back from injury for that purpose, but Ellie, how did you prepare for it?
So yeah, it wasn't the easiest, and it wasn't linear, because I came into sort of my captain role because one of the other girls in the team, Kelly, couldn't go because she'd had an operation. So she was our defensive captain. I had to step into that role. So it's quite a difficult time. Obviously, we were losing her as a player from the team for that tournament as well. So I had to kind of step up and take on this leadership role, which I hadn't really before. So a lot of that, I think that did help a lot in terms of my mental preparation, because I was trying to make sure everybody else was okay. I was running kind of film sessions for the defensive players. We were talking through things. I was having calls with them. So I think that actually helped to distract myself a little bit, so I wasn't so in my own head about my performance. I was focused on making sure the unit worked together. So actually that was helpful, but that brought its own challenges, because again, everybody's different on the team. We've got like people with corporate jobs, we've got business owners, we've got paramedics, huge responsibilities in their personal lives, and it's really hard to separate that from what you bring to the football field or to the football camp. So half of the battle, I think, in preparing for these tournaments is trying to make sure people are set up mentally for the pressure that a competition like that brings, because we'd never played in something like that before. It was the biggest flag football IFAF competition there had been. We were going to face nations outside of Europe, which we hadn't played at a national team level before. So a huge platform. And yeah, I think it was a really interesting lead up for me personally.
Yeah, I guess, so there's no way you can't tell yourself ahead of time of like how it's all going to go, and how you can obviously watch what other teams are doing, but there is no way until you're actually there kind of obviously doing it. And I guess obviously for you, Ellie, is it, like you were saying, it is trying to not only just focus on yourself, but also focus on and like that the defensive side of it, and trying to make sure your teammates are also okay, and they're also being able to kind of obviously perform at their best ability. So I can only imagine the difficulty kind of obviously that is for you. Kind of, Grace, what did you kind of find the most like challenging moment for you during the tournament, apart from obviously your knee being the main focus, but what kind of outside of that was the most challenging moment for you?
Oh, that's a hard question. Like throughout the whole tournament in general, or in the games, or like
whatever you'd like to talk about. Let's talk about in the games. What did you kind of find was your challenge?
Oh God, I mean, the worst moment, the most challenging moment, will always come back to the Japan game, the quarterfinals. So close yet so far from a top 4 spot. So that one will always kind of stay with me, and there's bits that I did in that game that will haunt me forever, because if they'd have been slightly different, the game might have been slightly different, that sort of thing. So that one will always stick with me as kind of being super challenging. And then going from that, then we had to go and play another game, which was then also as a team quite difficult. To pick ourselves up from that was no small feat,
because you can't obviously let it keep dwindling, because then it just has a constant impact on the next time you go out and play. What was the turnaround kind of time for that? Like how long a gap did you have between the two?
Ellie, can you remember?
I think it was a couple of hours, because right after the Japan game, obviously we were down to it was really close. We were down to the final seconds. I remember we were all standing there on the sideline. We were like, we're going to lose. And then I got called for drug testing right after the game. So I had to go and do that. And I had no idea where anyone else was, no idea where the team were. It's really hard to pee after you're dehydrated playing a game. So I was there for a really long time. And then when I did eventually come back and try and find people, everybody was really separate. Everybody was in quite a bad state. So I think that picked me up was bad. I think it was about 2 hours until we had to play again. And we had to sit down and say, hey, come on, we've got another job to do now. We need to kind of draw a line, move on, and take it into the next game. But that was probably my hardest moment as well.
See, in terms of the teams that do, obviously you mentioned there, you go to play teams that you've never even seen before, never mind played against before. I'll come to you first, Ellie. Was there a team that, even watching or playing against them, took you by surprise and you were like, wow, this team is actually really good and I wasn't expecting that?
Good question. From the teams we played, like we obviously had a good idea of how the European teams played. We played them a lot. We've got a lot of experience with them. It was the other international teams outside of Europe that we knew were going to be harder. So the likes of Panama in our group, we knew was going to be the toughest group game. We prepared for it. It was still tough. There was 1 point in it. We played Japan. I mean, we watched a lot of film on Japan. Probably should have watched more, but we watched a lot. And I think we thought it would be easier than it was. They were really challenging. So, but I think we knew that Canada was also going to be difficult. I think we were like probably not used to getting so many points scored against us. So most games we were scoring about 40 points, but we were also giving up about 40 points. And we, as a defense, we probably weren't used to that. I think that was challenging. And something we'll be looking to address moving forward. But yeah,
as you mentioned Japan there, like from the flag worlds, and even I watched them playing in the tackle under 20s. The Japanese have got some crazy play schemes, like stuff you'd watch game film all day and you could still never prepare for a team like that. And it's Japan is obviously a massive sporting country. Obviously they love their baseball, so they do love their American sports, but just seeing the growth of this game in countries like Japan, Panama, and things like that, it's phenomenal to see the growth. And like you say, Japan obviously beat us in a tight game. It's like, 5 years ago, would you have imagined Japan when they finished, Japan ended up finishing third? Would you have imagined 5 years ago Japan would be the third best team in the world? It's just crazy to see. And Grace, for yourself, was there any teams that caught you by surprise and what you played against, or I know you probably didn't get much time to actually watch many games, but somebody that kind of took you a bit surprised you or shocked you?
There was probably more surprises on the men's side, I would say, for the teams that made it through there, and like Switzerland, for example, and teams that got through on the men's side, they were probably more, like I say, a surprise than the women's. The women's side, we knew the strong teams going in, and they proved the strong teams coming out. So yeah, there wasn't load. I think it was more surprising actually seeing all these people play in real life, like not through a TV screen or on Instagram or on YouTube, like actually seeing these people that we've watched so much game footage on, and these amazing athletes actually being out there and performing. It's like, wow, they are very good. Or that person is so much taller than they look on footage. We had that in the Panama game. They were all so tall and we were tiny. And we were like, how are we going to do this?
No, yeah, I can imagine all of a sudden just like, oh my gosh, can't believe how actually tall what these people look like in real life.
You met Gav for the first time, Sarah.
Honestly, so Gav is 6'7", right? And I'm only 5'4.5". So I literally walked into Dan Kitchen. There's Gav, and I was like, oh my god! I was like, oh my gosh! I was like, right, can't get any pictures together. It needs to go Gav, Dan, Sarah. It has to go in that order. Otherwise, I'm just going to totally disappear. Poor person with the camera's going to have to tilt this way. It's not going to be a good time for anybody. But obviously, kind of when you were saying there, Ellie, about obviously doing the research on Japan and then maybe not doing enough, and then obviously your kind of new approach, obviously kind of moving to like the World Games for 2025. Is that part of obviously what you're looking to do now to prepare for like the games next year? And is there anything else you kind of learned from the 2024 kind of running what you're looking to do kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I'd like to see us take what we've observed on the film and implement it more at camp. So, our offense are running the Japan defense or whatever, and vice versa, the Japan offense and vice versa, so that we can actually prepare a bit better against fast-paced Japan plays. I think we perhaps didn't do enough of that, but we're going to carry on analysing film, analysing our own performance, and I don't think there was anything wrong with like that fundamental approach. I think we didn't execute, I think, in the way that we wanted to. They were all really close games. If you look at the Japan game, there was a few points in it. Our Canada game, there was 1 point in it. We're not far away. It's just like it comes down to, okay, who's actually going to execute on the day? And I think we need to like minimize our risk of messing those moments up, basically. And I also messed up during that Japan game. It's like, it's not one person. It's like those tiny little things build up, and that's what causes that 4 point difference or whatever it was. It's frustrating, but it's those tiny moments that matter.
And I thought, like, obviously following up from that, Grace, what is kind of the one area of your game that you're kind of really determined to improve, kind of moving kind of forward for next year?
That's a good question as well. All the good questions. So I actually play both sides of the ball. For GB, I tend to only play on offense, but obviously my rehab was all focused on running forward. So everything was forward. And then obviously for club and Cougars, I play on defense as well. So when we went to Champs Bowl, I had to then start running backwards because that's defense. So it was getting comfortable in those motions as well, because they are very different. There's lots of different body positions that you really don't do on offense that you have to do on defense, as well as the kind of the mental side. So I think it's just getting comfortable being able to do both sides of the ball. It's, like I say, it's getting the body used to those different things. And then I think the main thing that I don't love that I've lost is I used to be able to make quite a few people miss with the kind of the hip movements and stuff with the game, and just with the knee, that just it's kind of gone away. So it's trying to get that back as well. Some more yards after the catch.
And kind of how do you think the competition's going to like evolve between now and next year? Obviously, there's a bit more kind of time frame. Like, how do you see it kind of like continuing to go before then at all, Ellie, or do you think it, like, just the kind of lead up it's going to is kind of where you think it will be ahead?
In terms of our strategy or in terms of other teams' performance, or both?
Like, I guess kind of overall, like the overlining kind of competition in general, like do you like, how do you see you guys kind of evolving?
Yeah, so it'll be an interesting year because we'll have the World Games in China, which we know are in August. So you'll have, a bunch of teams competing there, but we also have to play our European Championship, which we believe is after that. We haven't had the dates confirmed yet. So, that's two major competitions in quite a short space of time. So that's already a very different twist on what our normal cycle would look like. So that will be a challenge. I think we'll have to prepare for a lot more teams during the cycle than we normally would. On top of that, we know that our competition is only going to get better. So especially the European teams, we're seeing them make huge strides. France, Spain, like they are getting better and better. We had tight games against them last year. They'll be tighter this year. So again, it's back to like executing, making sure we're minimizing any risk in our games. Definitely exploring. That's a nice thing about having so much film now. You can explore what other teams are doing to beat certain defenses or whatever. So, we'll be doing a lot more of evolving our playbook, working out, actually, do we want to throw in another defense for this kind of situation? There's a lot more strategic thinking we can do even before we step onto the field. So, it's an exciting year, but also there's quite a lot of uncertainty around how those two different competitions will play out.
Just as you mentioned earlier, so on the two competitions, so let's just do hypothetical here. You've got the World Games in China in August. You're going to have the Euros whenever they are. I'm assuming that September, October time. You're going to then be straight into your season straight after that. Go back to GB for a second. With those two tournaments back to back, does GB have a big enough squad to deal with that? Or do you think it's something they're going to have to expand the squad so that there's no player burnout, there's the risk of injuries gets lowered, because playing that amount of games over that short space of time, it's crazy. We've obviously spoke about ACL injuries. Do you feel that GB's squad is big enough at the moment to cope with that, or do you think it's something they're going to have to expand the squad to allow you more rotation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think, obviously, I can't speak on behalf of what the coaches have in mind, but I think ideally we would have a bigger squad and we'd be looking to expand our pool slightly. I think we're always looking for that anyway. We want to bring as many people into the program as we can, really, who we can develop over time. We want to be bringing in our kind of younger players now, looking ahead for the next 4 years. So I think ideally, yes. That being said, if we've got a tournament in August, a tournament in September, they will be very intense.
Yeah.
But I think players are really familiar with what they need to do to make themselves ready. I actually think the mental load will be harder because those periods of time, the lead up, and actually the come down after those tournaments is huge. Dealing with that roller coaster twice, like 1 month, next month, is going to be a lot. So you'd hope that we will be having something to address that and some support in place there.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Gray?
Yeah, definitely. Even just like the mental preparation, like you mentioned, of all those different teams that we're going to face, we have to know the film for all of those teams as well. We have to know their tendencies. And then as well, like a lot of the time when you're watching footage as a player, you're watching for tendencies of certain players as well. Can you use that to your advantage? So all of that you've got in your head. We don't have like a Pickford water bottle where you can write where everyone's going to score their penalties or whatever. So we have to keep all that stored up in our head. So the mental toll is huge. And then also you take a group of people who kind of then get merged together for a week. They spend a whole week together. And then we always call it the post-tourney blues because everyone's just like, oh my God, we have to go back to normal life. What is this? And then like Ellie said, I didn't even think about that until you said that, but like trying to get back up and down on that is going to be really tough as well. And I think what's difficult about increasing the team size is that we can definitely do that, and hopefully we can have new players come in and kind of elevate the team, but the competition stipulate how many people you can actually bring. Yeah. So we would love, so like when I first joined the first tournament I went to, we were allowed to take 15 players. And it just helps massively with that rotation. Whereas this year and last year, it was only 12. Mm-hmm. So 12 is really, really tough. If you're trying to have an offense and a defense, it means you only have 2 then players who kind of can rotate. It becomes a lot harder.
Yeah, that's I didn't realise it was. Well, I didn't obviously know it was 12. Was even just for your standard match day weekend at domestic level, 12 is not enough. I mean, never mind going playing in these tournaments where literally, like you said, you've got basically one sub on each side of the ball if players aren't playing both ways, and that's physically and mentally draining. A point you both made there was about the come downs after the tournament, like the adrenaline, but that's going to happen either way, whether it's a positive or a negative result from a tournament. Like having a bad result of dropping out and not getting successful is you're going to be down, but then it's coming if you win it, coming from that high to then go and compete in another tournament and kind of bring yourself back down to a level where you're like, wait a minute, yeah, we've won that last one, but like, you know what, park it, let's move on to the next tournament. That's not going to be easy at all, is it, Ellie?
No, and you know what, I think it's quite telling that, so we obviously won the European Championship. The men's side, Germany, won the European Championship. And I think both teams probably finished lower than they expected to at the World Championship. And I think part of that is to do with it is so hard once you've then, had a success, had a win, a championship, whatever. It's harder to then maintain that than it is to actually reach and keep going up.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be hugely challenging. I think the other thing that's quite hard, just talking about numbers of players and things, so we tend to have like a slightly larger training squad and then we pick the 12. But we need to have a few reserves in case of injury, which we have had, obviously, with Grace last year, with Kelly this year. You need to have people kind of standing by, and then they come in as a reserve. And I think that's always really difficult as well, because you're kind of in that spot where you're sort of on the cusp, then you get the call up, but you kind of still know that you're a reserve. Like, that's really difficult as well. So there's a lot of moving dynamics and things that make this year in particular exciting but challenging.
So we're going to start a campaign to get 20-person squads for you. We'll start that as of now. 20-person squad at the World Games and the Euros. That campaign starts now.
starts now. I think right this very instant.
That the squad's might go down to 10. Did I make this up?
I was going to say, yeah, it's going likely for 2028. It's going the other way.
It's crazy.
So 505D swing players, like, you've got so little room for injury. I think, that will be challenging.
Yeah, that's just stupid. I'm going to want back and say that's just a stupid idea.
It's ridiculous. It just doesn't leave any any like recovery, like within yourself, like even not even just in terms of injury, but just like general, like when you're talking about obviously the highs and the lows, there's no time for that to be able to like kind of get yourself back together again on it.
Just something you mentioned earlier, just talking about it. Let's just hypothetically say they go to 10 on 10, right, and you've got reserves. You talked about the cost of going to Ireland for the Euros and Grace going not playing. If you're a reserve player having to go to, let's just say, you're going to LA, I mean, we're hoping the funding will cover it, but just let's just say hypothetically, that's a lot of money to spend to maybe play. It's just crazy, yeah. 10-person squads is not the way forward. Sorry, Sarah. Grace, I'm on the soapbox again, I'm sorry. You mentioned it and I've just jumped on top of it with 2 feet, so sorry, Sarah, I'm derailing your topics, on you go.
No. I mean, but you're totally right. Like, I just couldn't believe going, like, if it's a 10-person team, you got to, like, obviously your reserves and paying and not doing anything. You would just, like, I just don't know how you would do, I guess, with that. But I guess maybe we'll talk about something positive about Ellie 2020. We won't focus on the 10 people teams. But obviously, looking ahead to that, like, how do you see like the impact's going to be on flag football, like evolving towards like this international stage in 2028, Grace?
It will be massive. I just hope it's massive in the lead up and not just at the tournament as well, because that part will be huge, because how many sports do we all watch the Olympics? I mean, I think even people that don't love sports or play sports will talk about the Olympics, even if it's the outfits and what they're wearing and the team kit and all of that. There's always a topic around the Olympics. So what will be nice is for people to go and see that. And at the end of the day, American football is in the name. It's an American sport. So it's not a secret that why they've picked it, but they'll put a spectacle on. So I'm hoping that even just from that is going to drive people to come and play the sport, watch the sport, want to get involved in it in some way or another. And then on the lead up to it, I just hope that it pushes it where we need it to go, so that we can go and compete there. And then the way that teams compete at the Olympics then again drives people back through to go and play it, pick it up, and then that follows through to the next cycle and the next cycle and the next cycle, and it all leads in. Yeah.
In a previous conversation I've had with the US wide receiver, you may know it, Izzy Garechi, she was talking about the 2032 Olympics, and I don't know whether it's just rumblings or rumours or whatever she's hearing, that if this is successful, there's a chance that this could then stay in for the next cycle in Brisbane in 2032. I mean, to get to the one Olympics, and we know with some Olympic sports, because they're the home Olympics, they put it in. So, like skateboard, for example, get brought into the Olympics for the home nations, but and obviously flag football is one.
Breakdancing.
Yeah, breakdancing, yeah. I mean, so the Americans have also done that with flag football. Thought, well, this is our chance to introduce a new sport to the Olympics, but I suppose it's going to be on, and something that me and Gav talk about a lot is it's the production of the sport that makes a massive difference. If you can put on a show, and I'm not talking about on the field, because you do what you do on the field, but if you can put on a show off the field, it then generates more interest, and that's what people want to see. The sport itself, we know it's an interesting sport, but if you've not got that production behind it, like the Worlds, the production at the Worlds was unbelievable. If you're watching that back home, it was treated like an elite sport, and the way they produced the film and stuff like that, getting that on an Olympic stage, hopefully, like you say, will bring more people towards the game, and hopefully it makes an impression enough that, you know what, actually, let's just keep this in. This is an elite sport, it deserves to be at the Olympics, so let's hope in 2032 we're talking about flag football in Brisbane. I suppose that would ultimately be the goal, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And like from the brand side as well, that's massive. And the involvement there, but I mean, Ellie can probably speak better on that than I can.
Well, I think it's, again, a sort of a deficit for our programme at the moment. Like, we've got some amazing content guys helping us at the moment with the way we HNC it, and with Andy Keith, our photographer. They do a huge amount on a voluntary basis. But, you know, when you see what like the US team are producing in terms of their content, it is amazing. And again, we're hoping that's another area of investment for the future, because it will also bring in the money too, you know. We wanna show the world that we are a really attractive sport, and attract as many new players, coaches, fans as possible. So it's a huge part of it, you know, building that fan base as well as getting the talent playing in the team.
Yeah, something like me and Gav both played the sport like back when it was in its infancy, really 20 years ago, and that's me showing my age off. But the development of the sport from then to now is, and I think a lot of it is driven by, like you say, Andy Keith. His content is unbelievable. I love watching Andy, looking at Andy's photos and stuff like it. He is excellent, and it's something we want to do at Tartan Touchdown. Is push a lot of the flag game, because also towards the Olympics, and it's speaking to people like yourselves, people in other countries that we want to push this game in sport and show what it can actually do. And we're wanting to give it as much coverage as we possibly can. So I know we joked about it earlier on about coming down for a game, but we are coming down for a game at some point, and we will be splashing it all over the place and pushing the game, and we'll do that up here as well, the local teams for us, and then we just want to help grow the game. Like you say, it needs as much focus as it possibly can. I think especially in this country, I still don't think this sport is taken as seriously as it should be in this country, and it makes the BBC articles and stuff like that because it's in the Olympics, but there's never any other coverage in any other mainstream media apart when this sport is ongoing. So more power to getting more of the word out, and it's something that we are definitely want to do going forward.
Yeah, and I think, we've got some new leadership in BAFA, our federation, and that seems, to be very positive from the interactions we've had so far.
Good.
So I think, there's definitely going to be a strategic focus on growing the sport, growing the game with eyes on 2028, but also beyond that. So creating a more sustainable program and development grassroots aspect as well.
Because even like I like, obviously it's a kind of, it's a personal sport rather than like a team sport, but even the development that like rock climbing had when that kind of had its obviously Olympic debut in 2020 to then watching it in 2024 to then the coverage it now gets, that's something I would love to see, like what happened to flag football, because I people that I know had no interest in rock climbing were all of a sudden all over it, trying it out, doing it, and that's what the Olympics has done to rock climbing is what I want to see the Olympics also do to flag football. And I think it totally can. It's just, as Dan was saying, it needs to have the right production, it needs to have the right setup, it needs to have the right people talking about it at the right time. So I guess that's, again, it all comes through people like yourselves talking about it a bit like more and getting out there, and us having a platform to actually talk about it. So yeah,
so, like you say, the right people talking about it. If anybody from the IOC is watching or listening, we will come and commentate on the Olympics flag football. We'll just put our picture in right now.
Listen, they have to have somebody commentated that's from the country if they've got representation in it. I'm there. I'll buy my ticket. It's okay. Like I'll pay my accommodation. I've got pals somewhere out there, I'm sure. BBC, I'll stay like 5 states over.
BBC, ITV, Sky. Anybody that needs anybody to cover the flag football, we're the people for you. Sorry.
Discovery had the Olympics this year. Listen, I'm my inbox is open. That's all I'll say. But this all really segues nicely kind of onto kind of the development of flag football kind of in the UK. Like what do you think, Grace, is kind of the key to making it more popular in the UK?
I think it's...
How long's a piece of string?
Yeah, I think it is. There's lots of bits off that really that are required. I think the main thing I'm not the first person that said it, but I'm a true believer in, like, if you don't see it, you can't be it kind of thing. And it just has to get out there. However that happens, whatever money or sponsorship or whatever it is that helps that to happen, people have to be viewing it to want to go and do it or know about it, because the amount of people that I talk to in daily life and you get onto the topic and it's like, oh, well, what's that? Oh, so it's a bit like tag rugby then? And it's like, well, no, not really, but sure, yeah, fine. And just like enough people like really don't know about it. And I always remember, Ellie, you were telling the story of your boss after the halftime show last year for the Super Bowl, and he said like, "Oh, isn't you tell the story?" But things like that. It's just people don't know about it, and how do we make that happen? X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, all of it. There's a whole list.
Yeah, I think it has to start with awareness. But we've been working with NFL Flag in schools to try and support them a bit, so they see that grown women do play the sport at a high level. We can talk to them about it. That it's actually really nice because they love talking about all the sports they do at school, and seeing them like starting to work together, play as a team, and not just learn like the skills of flag football, but actually learn how they come together through the wins, the losses, support each other. That's a huge part of it too. And flag football's great for that, right? Because the way everybody has to work together, the different roles people play, is really conducive to learning all of those really important teamwork skills. So I think the more the NFL are supporting these programs in schools and publicising that will go a long way in making sure it's getting into more schools. We're picking up people earlier and earlier, because it wasn't around at all when I was at school. I mean, loads of sports weren't, but I think Grace's story is not the norm. Like, it's quite unusual for people to just come into your school and start talking about it. So yeah, the support from the NFL and NFL flag, I hope that continues and kind of grows over the next few years.
And kind of what would you say to kind of like any young person that's like out there right now in the UK that is considering like taking up the sport? Like, is there anything that comes to mind straight away?
I guess I would reiterate that even if you think that there's always something that you can offer this sport, and that's true of tackle as well, right? But I think it's also true of flag, because it requires so much strategic thinking. You can be athletically brilliant, but you can still make a lot of mistakes because you perhaps aren't thinking in the right way you need to. So even if you're not the fastest person on the field, there's so much you can bring by just being clever and having football knowledge and playing in a certain way. So there's a role that you can play in this team, even if you don't see yourself as the most elite sports person in the world. I think that's a huge benefit.
And Grace, is there anything you would kind of add on to that, or would you just like stand on your soapbox and, and shout about it?
Yeah, again, probably. But it's just try it, and I think stick at it is the main thing. Take it up, but stay at it. I mean, like I say, 10 years ago I could have said no, and here I am now. And the sky's the limit with the sport. If you can get into it now and you're at the right age, I mean, God knows where you could end up. I mean, they're offering scholarships for it in America now. You can go and have a flag football scholarship. Yeah, I wish I was a few years younger, a lot years younger, so I could go and do that. But yeah, it's just like the opportunities are endless. So if you're going to get into it, now's the right time. And it doesn't have to be at the most elite level. You can get involved at the grassroots level as well. Like there's a pathway. There's so many tournaments you can go and play in. Like there's places I've visited in the world that I would never have gone without flag football. And the friends I've made are friends for life. So
I think that's really nice about the Women's League as well, because there aren't a ton of teams. Everybody knows each other. We're kind of quite a close community. We end up interacting with each other. Obviously, a lot of us know each other from GB anyway, but you see the same players at game days, and it's just really nice. It's very familiar. Everybody seems very comfortable. So if you're a new player coming into that, it's a nice, safe environment. Yeah, it's really nice to be around.
So, he's worth add something about just any young person want to take up this sport in general, but from two girls that have got to the level you're at, if there's any young females out there, or even parents of young females out there that are wanting to get into sport, one bit of advice would you give a young girl wanting to get into sport, Grace, just in general?
One, again, I could get on my soapbox. I can't give one.
Give us a key one. We could be here all night, but one
I know, it's too much.
A young girl wanting to get into sport, one bit of key advice would you give them?
Oh my God. Keep turning up, no matter what the results are, no matter if you feel like you had a bad session, or you didn't play well, or you played well, or you whatever it is, just keep turning up. Turn up to the next session, and the next session, and the next session, and before you know it, you'll have a medal around your neck.
You've had a wee second to think now.
I know, yeah.
What's your one bit of advice you'd give a young girl?
From like an athlete perspective, playing at the level we do, I would definitely say make sure you're putting in the work outside of the field, because if you can do that from a young age, you'll be in such a good position when you get to, joining the GB setup, an elite program of any sport, you'll be in such a better position than basically all of our generation were. But second of all, I would say like enjoy every single what.
See that? See how she's allowed two? I only had one.
I can't. I need to say this one because
Ellie was clever. She said as an athlete, and then she'd set up her stall.
It's all from an athlete perspective. Dan asked us from.
I think also because I'm slightly old, I'm one of the older ones on the team. I would definitely say enjoy every minute, even the losses. Like, remember you're there with your team, and you'll look back at that and think, actually, those are the best times of my life, even though it's heartbreaking in that moment. Being there with your team and having that experience will be the greatest experience you will ever have. And I don't know, I feel like I look back and think, I wish I'd got out of my head in that tournament, because actually looking back, we played really well. We achieved XYZ. And if I just taken a second to reflect on that in the moment, I think I would have actually been quite happy. Yeah.
The next time I bring that up for you at the next tournament, I want you to remember this. You can't moan at me. I'm going to be like, you said.
You said all of this stuff.
So you've got the evidence for it.
Please, just that one bit, yeah.
Just the one single bit that Grace can be like, remember you said this, I was there, I have 2 more witnesses for it. And I kind of guess as well to kind of wrap up obviously this absolutely incredible conversation we've had. It's been absolutely a joy to get to speak to you both and learn a bit more, and I hope Dan maybe has a hopeful bit more understanding for the women in his life as well, about what we kind of go through on a monthly basis. I can hear Leslie being like, finally. But what do you think, there's any specific skills that young female players should kind of focus on first? So let's say there's somebody right at the beginning of their kind of journey in flag football. Is there anything that you think you could say to them to hone in on a specific skill set? We'll go to Ellie first. I'll give Grace time to think.
One thing I've learned more recently, obviously, the skills, the flag football skills, and playing off your natural talent is important, especially at a young age. You've got to enjoy it. You've got to get the most from your natural talent. But when you need to start putting the work in, and as we've talked about, doing that from a young age is really important. I think it's important to focus on things like power and speed, but also coordination, the way your body works together. And some of those kind of compound movements in the gym that have all of the different parts of your body working together. I think that's hugely helpful in creating more of the way you're going to move on the field, right? Because it's rare you're going to move in isolation. Often we focus on isolated movements and don't do enough coordinated kind of strength and power work. I think that's hugely important in trying to support your body as you move in a football environment, and it's going to lead to huge benefits in terms of injury prevention and things like that in the future.
Have you had enough time to think, Grace?
I did, and then as she was talking, I was like, oh, that's quite a good point. I this isn't one skill, so it's my turn to cheat this time round.
You can cheat, we'll allow it.
But I would say from a skills and from the game perspective is don't pigeonhole yourself into just one position. I appreciate that you probably are going to prefer one side. We have players that definitely prefer one side of the ball, but every now and then we're like, off you go and try that one. And it's not necessarily because then you have to start playing the game in that position, but Ellie's probably knows this herself now as well, but from always playing defense to then having to come and learn offense, the things that you then learn on offense you can use on defense. So even if you're never going to play a game in offense or as a wide receiver, knowing how a wide receiver moves then means that how do I stop this? How can I prevent this? If I was to run it like this, that means I can stop it like that. And it opens the world of the game up massively.
I don't know if you girls follow college football at all, but the exact point you made there, Grace, is Travis Hunter's a classic example of it. The guy's probably the best wide receiver and the best cornerback in college football, and he probably is because he knows both positions, so he can adapt himself each way. So yeah, it's an excellent point. I love that point.
Definitely.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time, because we could just sit here and talk, I think, for the rest of time. at the moment. But I would just like to thank you both so much for coming on and sharing all those wonderful insights. I hope it was maybe a bit therapeutic for yourselves to get some out there when we all start journaling. I think that would be quite nice. But I can honestly say me and Dan will be there. I will drag Gavin down as well, even if he wants to come or not. He's got no other choice. But we'll be there, I guess, in our purple and pink. I think we'll have to commit to wearing the purple and pink. If you'll have us there on our soapbox,
100%,
we will be there. I think so.
Amazing. We'll hold you to that. We'll follow up in a few months' time.
Yeah. You don't have to hold us to it. We'll send you that clip, and then you can give us 3 weeks, and then you can just share that back with us. But no, we'll 100% be there. Thank you so much for coming on again. We really appreciate it. Please make sure to keep up with the girls. We'll obviously pop your social media channels as well. Obviously in the Coventry Cougars Facebook page, and also the Team GB stuff, so everybody can see how incredible you are, because that's at the end of the day how we found you, essentially. But yep, that's all we have time for Tartan Touchdown. We will see you in our next one. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, so you can continue to see all our lovely faces and all these lovely clips that we've just spoken about, because we'll put them all on up. But yep, we will see you next time.